Hi there, I'm Rebecca Mairs. I'm literary manager at the Lyric Theatre in Belfast.
Hi, Rebecca. Thanks a million for taking time out to take part in this. I suppose where I started with most people is asking, where did this all begin for you? Like, was it something that you always, was literature, plays always important to you from an early age?
Um, that's a good question because I've watched a few of these, and I know that kind of that's where you start off as like were you a theatrical child or whatever. So because you're a kid and you're completely self-obsessed, you have no sense of like yourself or how you're coming off. I asked my mum this morning. I said, was I theatrical? And she just kind of laughed for a really long period of time, very, very loudly. So I'm taking that to be yes. I think with me though, I kind of didn't want to be, I wasn't like a performer. I didn't feel like I wanted to be the center of attention, but I wanted to be in charge. I remember being quite like a bossy kind of child, like dare I say, a bit of like a director, I suppose. Um, and it kind of wasn't about, I mean, in terms of my family background, it wasn't like a performing or theatre family at all, but there was like a lot of like reading. So it was just, there was, the places coming down with books, and I was just like a voracious reader, really. And I suppose because we live in the country, we live in a farm. I suppose the most accessible thing to us was film and TV. So there's like a lot of like kind of that. Theatre was sort of quite at a distance. Like I certainly, drama clubs and that kind of thing wouldn't have been in my radar at all until like quite into secondary school, that could even be a thing that you could do for fun. Um, so it was sort of a thing that you did, like you went to the theatre at Christmas, you went to the panto or you went to the Christmas show. We actually, whenever I was in primary school, we went to like the Lyric kind of Christmas show every year. Or it was, like a touring educational company that would come in and do like a show about, eating your vegetables or Marie Curie or something like that. So it wasn't like a theatre family or theatre upbringing, but it was quite kind of a creative upbringing, quite and very much kind of focused on reading and books.
What books did
Um,
you, what books did you voraciously read at a young age? Was it everything, or was there?
Everything. I'd like so I'm the middle of three girls. So my older sister is 5 years older than me. So and she's like was incredibly academic, like she is an academic now. She's an Egyptologist. So she was always like really, really ahead in terms of her reading. And then she was also 5 years older than me. So I was kind of constantly trying to keep up with her. So I was like reading like Lord of the Rings and, Tolkien and what was it called? There was like a series of books called like the Redwall trilogy, which was like about like anthropomorphic kind of uh, woodland creatures in like a medieval fantasy like scenario that I was like really obsessed with. So everything. And then when I got into being a bit older, um, like anything to get my hands on, like American literature, Russian literature. I suppose the thing that's a bit frustrating now is because I kind of went through stuff so quickly, I actually can't remember. So I
Yeah,
know I've read like all Mikhail Bulgakov's work, but I remember Master and Margarita, and that's about it.
yeah.
So um, just anything like a real life fantasy kind of books and science fiction. I remember going on to there was like a library in Crumlin, which is closed now, unfortunately. Crumlin County Antrim, not Crumlin, Dublin, which is where I'm from. Um, and just going spending like all Saturday afternoons in there and kind of, Isaac Asimov and kind of getting the maximum amount of books you could, and then kind of going and trading it back kind of the following Saturday. And as well, like living, I mean, it was quite, because we live in the middle of nowhere, and it's a farm, so there's quite a bit of space. So it was kind of quite there's a lot of like focus on play and storytelling, and I would just kind of go off and roam around like quite like a rich sort of interior kind of fantasy world, I suppose. I had like um, a sophisticated network of like dens and forts and stuff kind of around the place, which I like, certainly in my memory of kind of growing up, being kind of 5, 6, 7, weekends or school holidays was just like waking up first thing in the morning, just taking myself off and spending the entire day like out, kind of uh, at these dens and like co-opting your sisters and your friends and to kind of, you know, quite elaborate, you know, kind of like play, and I was always in the middle kind of with the stories and telling people what to do and kind of all that kind of thing. But like it was quite like I would like it was quite sophisticated. Like I had like my main den like had shelves with all my books on it and stuff like that. And I again, like I was asking my mum about this kind of recently. I was like, were you ever kind of, did you ever like wonder, was I okay? Like whenever I went off for like 8 hours and you didn't see me? She's like, yeah, no, it was fine. We just thought you were playing, you know, by the river. It's like, okay, so you thought your 6-year-old daughter was messing around near running water. So, okay, that's cool. But it was quite like, it was quite free. And kind of that's kind of storytelling and kind of play acting was like a big part of that.
That's interesting, that kind of, because yeah, I mean, when you then sort of went into kind of more teenage, more kind of, you know, second level school, did it become kind of apparent that that kind of world was a world that you wanted to bring with you? Do you know what I mean? Like the imaginary, you know, the kind of the shaping of the story as much as the reading them.
Yeah, because I would always be writing as well, like writing little stories and doing little plays and stuff, just sort of for my own amusement or for, you know, for friends and family. And then whenever I went to secondary school, there was a drama club, so you know where that was, you could join that, and that was all encouraged. And I think for me as well, kind of, I think whenever you're that age, whether you're watching film or TV or seeing plays, all you're seeing is the actors on stage. So kind of feels like your only option. You have no idea at that point about what a director is, or, you know, the concept of a writer, or any of kind of that behind the scenes stuff. So whenever I went to secondary school, I was sort of getting a wee bit more knowledge about that in terms of how, like, the different roles. And I, as much as sort of I wanted to be the kind of person that would perform, I just like no discernible talent whatsoever in that kind of regard, but also like quite crippling kind of stage fright. Like I didn't really want to be, you know, the center of attention. So I quite quickly worked out that I could maneuver myself into kind of these behind the scenes kind of roles, because most people who were doing drama club wanted to be acting. So that was good. You know, so to be fine.
And was it ever something though that you kind of went, like, was it a kind of a choice for you, you know, or was it kind of was there a choice kind of going, God, I'd love to act, but no, I don't fancy it, or sounds like a quite natural move towards?
Yeah, I think I just knew I didn't have the confidence for it. Like I remember, so I didn't do drama at school. Like I didn't choose it as an option. I just did drama club, and you did drama in first year, as you know, as part of the curriculum. And I really hated like improv, like, you know, get into a group and devise a piece. I really didn't want to be in stuff. But whenever I quickly realized that whenever we kind of went into groups again, it's kind of the bossy kind of this coming out, is that I quickly kind of went, well, I'll write it, you know, because you all want to perform and you don't really care about kind of what you're saying. You just want to, you know, play about and show off. So I'll write it all, and you can do it. So kind of it happened very, very quickly. And I remember, so in drama club you did like kind of a showcase kind of every year, and I think it was first year or second year. It was like, I think it might have been the very first thing, like a proper play I wrote. And it was stupid. It was really silly. There was like the whole idea was that it was set in a teacher's staff room, and the whole point is that the teachers are as badly behaved as like the kids. Like they're drinking and smoking and swearing and, like, you know, copying each other's homework and kind of all that kind of stuff. And then the headmaster is like the teacher character. So it was really, really stupid. But I remember doing that, and I remember being in it. And of course, like, you're 12 and you think you're hysterical. So I remember like I had a line, and I got a really, really big laugh. And that was the moment, because it's like the, you know, the power of that. Like I just made loads of like adults laugh here. That's kind of great. But I remember thinking it wasn't in a performance way. It wasn't getting the, you know, the hit from, you know, I've performed and people are kind of loving it. It was more the fact that I'd written something that people found funny. It was kind of that side of things that I was kind of more, you know, excited about and pleased about. So yeah, I kind of very quickly kind of maneuvered myself into writing and
I had
being.
theatre, had the kind of experience of theatre come into your life at that stage. I mean, was going to the theatre something that you did during school, or was it kind of still a distant thing?
Um, Again, if you did drama, it was part of like your course that you would go and see plays, but because I didn't do it, I would go. Yeah, I think um, I was more aware of, I suppose, in school, like final year plays were like a huge thing. It was a massive school, um, so the end of year plays were always like a big musical, and they were like quite good and quite like the production values were quite good. So it wasn't so much about you were doing a lot of theatre in school, I suppose. So even though I mean, even though I didn't actually do drama, I totally wormed my way in to all of that because so you'd begin rehearsing like months out in the weekends. So I would just turn up and kind of get involved with like designing the set or painting the set or sourcing props or making stuff. And then it was like a week or two before the show, which is was like is tech week now, where everyone who was either in the show or did drama was kind of like allowed out of class, kind of carte blanche, and you come in like your own clothes just to work on the show. So I just did that, just turned up in my normal clothes, and because again it was a big school and like people maybe the teachers didn't talk to each other that much. It was just like assumed that I'd got permission to be there, and they needed hands on deck. So I did that, and I did like stage management, but again because I was like so afraid of being on stage, I kind of wouldn't be one of the people that would go out and do the set changes. I kind of insisted that I was at the side on the cans, like basically directing kind of everyone about backstage. And I think that's what I really, really loved. I loved being like in the middle of stuff behind the scenes, and I loved knowing all the different moving parts. And it's also knowing things like the audience don't know. So you know how it all works. And I really, really liked that. I kind of liked, yeah, like having that overview sort of everything.
What was that feeling like? I mean, it's, you know, because that sense of being part of something, but B, knowing the secrets. So you're like, you know, like a magician, not knowing the kind of what did that feel like? Do you remember what that felt like when you were kind of back then at that age?
I felt like you were making magic. Because I remember, and we were in third year and we did Bugsy Malone, and obviously splurge guns are like a huge part of that. So we had to like a bunch of like 14, 15-year-olds had to go and work out how to make non-fatal splurge guns to use in the production. And that was great. It was just like you spent like hours and hours like mucking around, you know, outside, like trying to make these things work. You felt like you were part of something. You felt like you were part, like it was that kind of real sense of belonging, like you were part of a team. And it was all very intense.
Yeah.
And you were together. I really liked that. It felt like you were just you're part of like a secret.
Yeah.
There was so the stage in school was raised up, and underneath it was this huge big kind of cavernous area that was used for storage. And there was a door to it, but it was locked. Because it was like there was heating systems down there and kind of security stuff. But you could access it via the stage, like with a little trap door, and you get down to it, like basically quite elaborately, kind of acrobatically trying to kind of get down all these kind of heating ducts into the bottom of the stage. And that's where people used to go to like to smoke, essentially. But it was just kind of, but that kind of was part of it that you were kind of accessing. So that's kind of like a bit of a laboured sort of metaphor that you were accessing something that other people couldn't get access to, and you kind of held, you know, you kind of held a secret, so you kind of you knew how it all worked. It's like a magician, like knowing how the trick works.
Yeah, it's kind of like, though, I mean, it reminds me of what you said earlier on about that kind of, you know, 6-7-year-old girl running down and making, you know, dens. Kind of has that same vibe to it, you know. And
I love a den, like anywhere I can find a den or make one, yeah.
And in relation to then, kind of, you know, as you leave school, like, was it in relation to it being something that you wanted to do with your life? like as a profession or as a career? Like, did you have a sense of where that was going to that stage, or was it kind of following your nose? Or
no, I suppose there was a bit of tension at school because it was quite like it was quite an academic school, and because I was coming kind of in the wake of an older sister who was this sort of academic kind of genius, it was assumed that I was also an academic genius, which I was not quite. I was much more interested in like art and kind of drama and that kind of things. But it was sort of that wasn't encouraged. That was seen to be the thing you did at the side before you became like a doctor or a lawyer or that kind of thing. So whenever it came to do, you know, and that's why I kind of was really discouraged actually by the school to do kind of creative kind of subjects. So when it came to do like university applications, there wasn't really any kind of option but to do something academic. So I did English Lit at uni, but there was no sense that I would do drama or anything. That would just continue being something that I kind of did kind of on the side. And it was like, I remember like whenever I was at uni, I did do kind of, it was very bits and pieces. And again, I didn't join DramSoc because I was just so afraid of like the performance element, I suppose. So I would do like, I worked in a short film. I was production manager on a short. It's actually Brian Falconer and Jonathan Beers short, who are Out of Orbit. They've just done Ordinary Love with Liam Neeson and Leslie Manville now. So I worked in their short. And there was like a few plays, like there was Fast and Loose, which was a bit like 24-hour plays. So I was involved in that for a couple of years, just as a hand, just as a person, as a body. But whenever I was at uni, I had a part-time job, which was working in a bookshop and cafe. It was called Bookfinders. It's sadly closed, but it was sort of like, it opened in 1985, and it's like an institution, and it was a real like creative kind of cultural hub. And I just worked part-time in there whenever I was studying, and it was amazing. It just was kind of quite bohemian, and you'd have like, you know, poetry kind of nights and open mic nights and book launches. I set up like a anything but poetry night, you know, like, you know, prose or plays or something. And DramSoc had their like monthly meetings, piss ups really in there. So I kind of felt like on the periphery of stuff quite a bit. But then the people that would come into Bookfinders would be quite creative. So it's where I first met Glenn Patterson, who, you know, the writer. So we were just across the road from the Seamus Heaney Centre for Poetry. And so he would come in like almost on a daily basis, and he would have his tutorial groups kind of there. And it's where kind of writers would sit or students would sit and kind of do their work. And it's also where I met Colin Carberry, who, so Glenn and Colin obviously wrote Good Vibrations together. So Colin would have his interviews in Bookfinders. He was a music journalist. So that was really nice because they can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they began working on Good Vibrations, the film, whenever I was working in Bookfinders. Mm-hmm. And then I went off a few years later. I worked at Northern Ireland Screen, and whenever I was at NI Screen, the film was being made. And then whenever I moved to the Lyric, they just gave me permission to do the stage play. So I've been totally stalking that project for like 12 to 15 years.
And to just to take me back then to sort of when you're leaving school and going to college, and because I studied English myself, and I never forget the conversation my aunt and uncle, you know, brought me out for dinner one night and went, "So what's that now? What's that going to get? What job? What like why are you studying this?" And I was like, because I like it. So was that? Did you have it in your head about kind of an area, or was it just something that you wanted to study?
No, teacher. Everyone just assumes you're going to be a teacher. My mom's a teacher, so it was just like, and I knew because again, my mom's a teacher. You kind of know that you need to be really passionate about it to be good at it, like anything, I suppose. And I just knew I just wasn't particularly passionate about it. Like, so I kind of didn't want to do that. I was good at. I suppose I was just kind of following my nose really because I was good at English. So I'll go off and do English. I kind of knew I wanted to be creative, and I was probably linked to film or theatre. But I kind of didn't know, and I knew I liked writing, and I knew I had a critical eye, I suppose, for other people's writing as well. So I kind of wanted to do something around that, but it wasn't a career kind of path, like, in terms of like a literary manager or a dramaturg, like, what's that? You've no idea.
And in relation to being a voracious reader, was there a time when reading screenplays or play texts become more for you, or as important as prose and poetry, or was there a discernible shift in that?
Oh yeah, like way back. That's like, film and then theater were sort of like my first
Okay.
love, is like, because it's the performance of it, it's the liveness of it. I suppose even in with I was like a huge film buff, and like, actually, whenever I was actually, I've totally glossed over it, but whenever I was 16, one of like the most impactful things in terms of my career was I went and did a film school in Kilkenny, kind of one summer. I was like 5 weeks, and just had like a massive impact on my life, because it just was, here's a bunch of equipment, kids, like, go off and make a film, like, and it was a feature film, and every week you did like a different job. So I was director the first week, and then camera op, and then boom, and then editing. So you kind of got like a real overview of all the different jobs, but you were kind of like given a lot of freedom, and a lot of, like, it was really kind of led by the young people on the course. And it was the first time I'd gone to like being around people who'd seen like the obscure films that I'd seen. And you could really, you kind of like spoke the same language, I suppose. So even though that was like, just like, it was one summer after I did my GCSEs, like, that kind of really gave me, it opened up things for me, in that, okay, I can do this, plus I have a bit of experience kind of in this. So it was a real kind of gift. And then whenever I was at uni and stuff, I would be doing kind of like just whatever training courses I could see, like whether it was like production, like film production, or new entrance. And I screened like a new entrance kind of course, which is like an intensive week-long course, and I got kind of some work experience doing script editing kind of from that. So it was just like, it was very bitty, in my early 20s. It was just like, wherever I saw an opportunity, or whenever like a course or experience came up, I would kind of take it. And it was all like unpaid, it was just, and it was something we were doing on the side. But no, it wasn't that clarity. In fact, I was going to be an academic. I was going to be a medievalist. So whenever I did I finished my degree, I got a scholarship to do an MA in medieval literature. And I went into that going, right, this is it. I'm going to do my PhD. I'm going to get like leather, patches for my elbows, my cardigan. And I'm going to be a medievalist, like an academic. And I think I loved the MA. It was brilliant. I loved the reading. I loved the history. I loved all the research. But again, having my older sister at that point was a working academic. It's like the arts. It's a vocation. It's not a 9 to 5. It's precarious. It's unstable. And the only way you have like a shot in hell at succeeding is if you're completely obsessed and passionate about what you're doing. And I just knew that I kind of lacked that kind of academic rigor. I knew I really enjoyed it and I really liked it, but I kind of didn't quite have like what it took. So whenever we went and did the MA, there was like, I think 5 or 6 other people in the MA. At the beginning of the year, I was like the only one who was going to do the PhD, and I ended up being the only one who didn't.
Wow, yeah.
And then there was so it was like towards the end of that sort of MA year, I was sort of like having an embarrassing like quarter life crisis about, who am I? What am I going to do? And then a job came up at Northern Ireland Screen, which is the screen development agency in the north. My mum found it, and it was like a maternity cover working in funding. So it was like numbers, and like I was an English student, so I was like, there's no way. And to my total shock, I was interviewed, and then I got it, and it was just a 9 months kind of cover for someone, but I ended up going and working there for almost 2 years. So that was great, and that was sort of the jump I needed. That was just started everything, I suppose, for me.
And then, so okay, I'm interested then, kind of in relation to say that you're into kind of that world of professional practice, or film. So from there, because an awful lot of this stuff that you've spoken about is very hands-on. I mean, you're talking about production, you're talking about directing, you're talking about that, you know, and I suppose that's a really interesting dynamic to have with someone who's ended up in the role that you have or in the work that you do, because you don't know all sides of it. Do you know what I mean? So it's not purely from a literary point of view. So can you talk me back from where you are now back to the film?
Yeah.
And see, you know, was there a method in your madness? Was it kind of emerging for you, kind of going, I want to be able to, you know, really work with writers, work with plays.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you talk a bit about that?
I so whenever the job was in funding at an ice cream, and which was a great place to be because you were the first point of contact, and again you were in the middle of everything. So you know, it was a small team anyway at the time. It was like 25 people I think worked there. It was all open plan office, so you got to see like how everything worked. But the big thing for me, which kind of got me started in all this, or allowed me to develop kind of where I wanted to go, was that whenever you work in funding, you get all the applications through. So you get all the scripts. So I just began reading everything, and then you're also, because of, you know, you're responsible for like, you know, the admin of the grant really. So you know, spreadsheets and kind of everything's released in tranches. You were also the first people that got what we called the deliverables, which were, you know, a DVD of the film, of the finished whatever it was, or like the next draft script. So I just read and watched everything, like on my lunch hour, and it was really nice because it was sort of like again, like everyone was totally passionate about film and about TV and about what they were doing, whether you worked in funding or finance or marketing or education. We all had the same sort of level of passion and knowledge about it, so that was great. So there's a real, it wasn't like, not that it was part of your job, but there was a real expectation that you would want to, you know, read the work and see the work and be able to have a conversation about it and kind of to be supportive of it. So yeah, just every lunch hour I just would read, you know everything and watch, and that was a good sort of training exercise where you'd be reading the script and then you could watch the final product and then kind of compare and contrast and see how kind of they'd made it, I suppose. So that was really that was noticed. That was like, I think they kind of saw that I was really kind of into that. Like Ursula Devine, who is a development executive, and is still kind of the development executive, was just like so supportive. Like she saw that I was kind of really loved kind of the writing side of things and scripts and working with writers. So she there was like in-house reader training, so I was allowed to kind of do that. So I was kind of given some like reading training and script editing training, and she would always be asking me like my opinion, like unofficial opinion on kind of scripts, and she would get me to do some reports just for the experience of doing it. So that was really, really encouraging. And then she went to go on maternity, and I realised I sort of had been tested for the past kind of couple of months. So they asked me to cover her maternity for, I think it was just over a year. So that's how I ended up kind of staying kind of longer. And that was brilliant. That was like, so you were reading hundreds and hundreds of scripts and working with writers and giving feedback on like drafts and things like that, and managing. So it's basically very, very similar to the job I do now, but just it was in the screen industries, really.
Yeah, and
that was, yeah.
And what that flip, or that kind of move to the stage, was that a kind of natural thing, progression for you, or was it a big jump?
For me, the rules are very similar because the kind of the medium's different, but whenever the contract at NI Screen came up, it's different now, even like a few years later, but at the time there wasn't really any opportunities in terms of script editing or dramaturgy or you know, development of scripted content in Northern Ireland at the time. And if, you know, for practical reasons, I wanted to kind of to stay here. So for me, it didn't seem like an option to, unfortunately, to kind of pursue that. So I got a job at Craft NI, which was like working with applied artists, and that was, even though it seems like completely like a swerve, I was doing kind of talent development there. So that was basically setting up and running talent development programs and career progression programs and that kind of artist support sort of side of things. So even though the art form was different, the kind of the practicalities of how you support an artist and how you, I suppose, give them kind of guidance and what they need to progress their careers. It's the same sort of thing. And then the job came up at the Lyric. I was like, these two things kind of coming together. And also like the Lyric is like really, really like a hugely special place for me. Like it was where I saw my first professional shows. Whenever I was attempting to act, whenever I was 12, 13, I was in like Youth Lyric, which met down in Stranmillis. I like the old building, because we've got this beautiful new building, but the old buildings like was really, really kind of an important place for me. I remember like it's actually one of my first memories, but like I think it must have been a Christmas show. I can't remember what it was now, but it was a school trip, and I would have been really young, like P1 or P2, and just loved the show. Just was like swept away with the magic of it, and just was on a high after seeing it. And kind of were waiting around for a bus to come and pick us up, and one of the kids who was in the show came out the stage door in his like school uniform. It was like I remember the school he went to, and like walked off to go to school, and like my mind was just exploded, because that was like a normal kid who was then going to go off and go to school. So that was my first moment where I kind of thought I could there's something here. So whenever that joke came up the Lyric, I just jumped at it and was really, really lucky and really delighted to get it. And that was June 2016. So I've been there for getting on 4 years.
And I suppose I'm just interested in the role that you do based upon what you just explained, your kind of interest. What is it that fires you about something? I'm not saying like what makes a good play, but like for you, like how do you get a sense of that magic within yourself? Because it's like for some people, like reading plays is a difficult thing. It's kind of, some people struggle with reading plays because it's a live context. But what does that feel like for you when you kind of go, oh, there's something here?
I love reading scripts, obviously, but I get so excited before I open it. Because everything's potential, on that first page. I think it's really I'm really guilty of using sort of nonsense, vague terms that writers hate. Like, and I get them in open calls all the time. Original, fresh, unique voice. It's like, what does that mean? But it's like, that's what you're looking for. It's really difficult to sort of qualify. I love the scripts I've loved reading, or I get really, really excited whenever I open a script. And it could be a first draft, it could be something that's really, really early in development, but there's a real sense of the person's personality in it, the person's voice. And yes, there could be a lot of work to be done in terms of character or structure or something, but just the way it's written, no one else could have written that. And especially whenever someone's got quite a strong voice, I automatically feel very assured, because there's a confidence in that, and you kind of feel like you're in safe hands. So I say that totally aware that how do you convey to someone what a unique voice is, but you kind of know it when you see it.
Yeah.
So I suppose it's that whenever someone is writing in a way that is uniquely them, I suppose.
And that job then of kind of, the delicate space of working with somebody in development, it's a real skill. And is that something that you find, I don't mean easy, but is that something that you like in relation to working with writers on, editing, developing dramaturgy? Is that something that Do you have a process for that yourself, or does it really depend on who you're working with?
It depends on who I'm working with in the project, I suppose. I really, really enjoy it. Like, it really suits my personality, and it suits sort of my, like, everything I've just talked to you about in terms of what I've come through. I really, really like being in that sort of support role. I like being a facilitator. I like being like a fixer for people. Like, and I've no real desire to try to impose my sort of vision, or because I'm not. I don't. I mean, this is. I know other dramaturgs that will disagree with this. This is my own kind of complete personal opinion. I'm not an artist. I'm a creative. Like, I've a creative mind, and I can bring that to bear. But you know, you've made the clay. Like, I can add to it and I can help kind of sculpt it, but the artist has made this. So I really, really like. So I find being in that kind of support role really a natural place to be. When I'm first kind of, so whenever you're first meeting with someone, I'll always want to read their work first, before I meet them, just to kind of see what they're interested in writing about, or see what their style is.
Yeah.
And I'll spend like a long time trying to get to know them, where the ideas come from, and what's got them really excited about, that idea or that character or that situation or whatever. So I can really understand the piece of work, what they're trying to do, and make sure that everything that I then bring to it is serving that, that kind of that kernel of the idea. So I spend a lot of time getting to know the playwright and getting to know the work and where the ideas come from, because you don't want to. I mean, I always feel like if you're having development meetings, you should just be asking lots of questions as opposed to telling people things. Although Mark Overo came up and did a masterclass last year, and I wish I should have recorded it. It was amazing. He just like spoke for 3 hours, and just like everything was like a juicy like nugget, pearl of wisdom. But he said that he really likes whenever people are giving feedback and they make a suggestion, because it's the ego in him. It's like, that's crap, but I need to beat that. I really, really like that. So I learned from that. So I kind of, depending on the person, I suppose, the artist I'm working with, I'll always ask, like, now, do you want a really crap suggestion to beat? But yeah, but mostly I'm asking questions. Mostly I'm kind of trying to suss out what they're trying to say with it.
Yeah. And is there, not necessarily in your kind of current role or current situation, but is there work within the arts or within the theatre or within film or music, and even that you kind of go back to, that's a kind of touchstone for you, or that kind of blew your head away, or that changed things for you? Is there work that, or people that you kind of, this is the crappy question to get.
Yeah. What? So is it like things that I've seen that kind of really inspired?
Yeah.
Like had
it could be something you've seen. It could be a piece of music that kind of you go back to, or it's something like touchstones, I suppose, that you would have carried through your life.
God, that's a really harsh question. I don't know what to answer. I don't think there's like a piece of music necessarily. Like, again, because of the accessibility, whenever I was younger, like, film is a big thing, and there's certain, again, because I had an older sister, I was kind of subjected to watch things I really shouldn't have been watching whenever I was 10 or 11. So I've kind of there are certain films, definitely. In terms of plays, God, like that experience of seeing the kids after the show,
yeah,
is was huge. Like, as being one of my first memories, like, that was massive. I suppose I'm trying to think, actually, mostly kind of recent years, I went to see, it would have been at the Lyric about 7 years ago now, or 6 years, but the Pillowman, Decadent, did a version of that, which was just blew my head off. I absolutely loved it. And it was the first Martin McDonagh show I saw. And just, it just blew me away. Like, was incredible. Things like,
I suppose.
Oh, sorry.
No, sorry. I suppose the reason I'm asking you is kind of in a way, like you're talking about the Marco Rowe kind of, metaphor, the kind of crappy question. It's more around the sense of what was that about the Pillowman? Like, what kind of What was it that blew you away about it?
Oh, this well, it's a play about storytelling, so that's my jam. But I suppose I'm quite a cheap date in terms of if you do anything really amazing with the set, I'm there. I'm there for that. It's the scale of it. Whenever something can only be a piece of theatre, I think that's it. It can't be a film. It can't be a novel. This can only happen on a stage. Um, I went. Lisa Dwan did a trilogy of Beckett plays: Not I, Footfalls, and Rockabye. Do you remember? Do you see that?
Oh, one of them, yeah, yeah.
That was incredible. Again, that felt like a experience that could only happen in a theatre. You know, you were in pitch black. It's they're not horror kind of stories, but yet you were absolutely filled with the sense of dread, and you were on the edge of your seat and waiting for. And I knew the plays, and I knew like nothing jumps out or anything in them, but you're expecting that the entire way through. So things that can thoroughly only happen on the stage. And I think the collective experience as well is really, really important, which we're really missing now. Like we were talking a bit about before, about just the fact that we all are wanting to make work, but we're trying to find work that can be accessible online, kind of in some way. And but you're missing that, I suppose, the collective experience. You know, multiple people logging into Zoom isn't the same as being shoulder to shoulder with someone, or hearing the gasps, or hearing the intake of breath, or that kind of thing. Yeah.
Ask me about, sorry, just something that interesting there, what you said about sets and design elements. In relation to your work with a writer, like how much does that kind of infiltrate those conversations in relation to the putting it on stage, depending on how much that's written in the text? Does that come up a lot?
In terms of like a writer putting in the theatricality, in terms of it,
like sort of in relation to like the settings of it, or where things are set, or the mise en scene kind of piece of the writing. Is that something that you love talking about as well?
Yeah, I especially work with kind of non-naturalistic. So like, why have they chosen this particular scenario? I suppose always, especially because if you're working with commissioned work, you're always going to view to production. So I'm always sort of got half an eye on, can we actually do this in the end? So suppose it's general good advice, like don't write in something unless it's completely necessary. And if you write it in, we're going to trust that it's completely necessary. I'm going to try to make it kind of happen. I think in terms of like the writer being involved in like the production itself, like every writer is different, but I kind of would like them to be involved as much as possible.
Yeah.
And certainly people that I have worked with so far have been really interested in well, not so much as trying to stipulate things, but being really, really interested in being involved in the design process and casting process and things like that. And we would encourage that.
Yeah. I'll let you go in a minute. I've got just a couple more quick questions for you in relation to, do you still write yourself?
Yeah, but it's just crap. It's just for my own enjoyment. I write I don't write plays. I write screenplays. Okay. Because I find the format of those kind of really reassuring, but just for my own enjoyment, and I would never show them to anyone. But it's also quite good as well to kind of keep your foot in that creative process, so that you remember what it's like whenever you're talking to a writer.
Yeah, and do you still personally read as opposed to having to professionally read? I mean, is reading still a kind of a spare time endeavor for you?
I mean, there's my books. There's my lockdown books I'm hoping to read. Yes, I try to. I probably would read plays during work and try to read like prose novels and stuff, or screenplays kind of outside of work. But especially at the moment, like I bought those for lockdown and I haven't touched them because work's been so busy. But yeah, I think it's really important to kind of keep reading outside of work stuff.
And what's it like actually working with writers over this, I suppose it's
grand. I mean, it's in a way, I'm quite very lucky in that it hasn't massively affected what I do. I mean, I can still read plays, I can still talk to writers, I can still give written notes to people. I think there is a thing with there's a thing with you're missing body language, or you're missing the what it is to be with someone in on these things, which can make kind of talking of sometimes a bit kind of stilted. And there's always, like, we've done it as well, where you can like begin talking and then you pause. And there's always like a bit of a delay or something. Whereas if you were in real life, it wouldn't happen. But it's been grand, and I've had a lot of development meetings. Like, people are kind of obviously thinking about, you know, because they've had work cancelled, or they can't do what they had planned. People are kind of thinking about development and script writing. So I've had a lot of like good conversations with people. So it is what it is. It's fine.
Trying to avoid 500 confinement plays next summer. I think that's
me embracing this. This is the thing. I don't want to say don't write it.
Yeah.
It's always like there'll be like someone who's just got an amazing perspective or idea or concept about it, but just know that you're going to be in competition with like a 1 million other plays about the same thing.
Rebecca, listen, thanks very, very much for taking part. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you.
Thank you.
And I hope you get through your books. It's very important.
You too.
Thanks
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.